Pride is such a strange thing. It keeps people locked in positions they no longer believe, defending arguments they know are weak, maintaining stances that hurt the very relationships they care about most. It makes people double down on mistakes rather than admit them, makes them justify and explain and deflect rather than simply acknowledge the truth. And all of it, every bit of that exhausting performance, creates distance, creates walls, creates loneliness disguised as strength. Because somehow, somewhere, the message got internalized that being wrong is shameful, that admitting error is weakness, that changing a position means failure, so people stay stuck, stay defended, stay alone in their rightness, and the relationships they care about slowly fade away, wounded by the refusal to speak 4 simple words that could change everything. My name is Annie, and for too many years I was one of those people, trapped by pride, unable to admit when I was wrong. Defending positions long past the point of reason, and it cost me relationships, cost me trust, cost me connection, until I learned slowly and painfully that the 4 words I was wrong before aren't a surrender. They're a bridge. They're an invitation. They're the foundation of real trust and respect and connection. They're what transforms relationships from battlegrounds into partnerships, from power struggles into mutual growth, from isolation into intimacy. The hardest place to say these words is in family, with the people who have known us the longest, with the ones who watched us make the mistake in real time, with the relationships where history is long and patterns are deep, and admitting wrong feels like handing over ammunition that will be used against us forever. The fear is enormous. What if they say, "I told you so"? What if they never let us forget it? What if admitting this one wrong thing opens the door to every other wrong thing? What if vulnerability becomes a weapon, but holding on to being right when wrong creates something worse than any of those feared outcomes? It creates distance that never heals, resentment that never releases, pain that never gets acknowledged, and eventually, it creates estrangement that feels permanent because the positions have become so entrenched that neither side can imagine a way out. I remember a moment with my sister. We'd had an argument years before, something about family dynamics, about responsibilities and fairness and who was doing more and who was doing less. And I'd taken a position, a strong position, a position that felt righteous and true and justified. And I defended that position fiercely, had gathered evidence, had built a case, had convinced myself completely that I was right and she was wrong. The argument had ended badly, with both of us angry, both of us hurt, both of us certain the other one was being unreasonable. And then we just stopped talking about it, stopped talking about much of anything, really. The relationship became surface level, polite, distant. We'd see each other at family gatherings and be civil and make small talk and pretend everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. The argument sat between us like a wall, and every interaction had to navigate around it, had to avoid any topic that might lead back to it, had to stay safe and shallow and carefully controlled. Years passed like that. Years of missing my sister. Years of wishing things were different but not knowing how to bridge the gap. Years of pride keeping me locked in that old position even though, if I was honest with myself, I knew I'd been wrong. Not entirely wrong, maybe, but wrong enough. Wrong in ways that mattered. Wrong in ways that had hurt her. Wrong in ways that I'd been too proud to admit when it might have made a difference. And then one day, something shifted. Maybe it was getting older. Maybe it was becoming tired of the distance. Maybe it was watching other relationships end permanently and realizing how precious time is. Whatever the cause, something broke through the pride, and I called her, and I said the words that had been stuck in my throat for years. I was wrong before, about that argument, about what I said, about how I acted. I was wrong and I'm sorry. The silence on the other end of the phone was long, long enough that I wondered if she'd heard me. Long enough that I started to panic, started to think maybe I'd made things worse, started to regret breaking the careful politeness we'd maintained. But then she spoke, and her voice was different, softer, shaking slightly, and she said, "Thank you, I've needed to hear that." That was all, just those words, but they opened everything. The conversation that followed was the most honest we'd had in years. She shared how much I'd hurt her. I listened without defending. She explained her perspective. I acknowledged what I'd been unable to see before. And slowly, carefully, the wall between us started to come down. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to find each other again, enough to rebuild trust, enough to remember why we'd loved each other in the first place. What I learned from that moment was profound. The 4 words didn't make me smaller. They made me bigger. They didn't diminish me. They elevated me. Because admitting wrong takes more strength than defending it. Acknowledging error takes more courage than justifying it. Being vulnerable takes more bravery than staying armored. And the trust that came from those words, the respect that followed, the connection that rebuilt, all of it was worth more than the pride I'd been protecting. As the years passed, there were more opportunities to use those words. More moments when pride and truth battled inside and the choice had to be made. Would the old pattern win? The pattern of defending, justifying, explaining, never quite admitting fault. Or could something new happen? Could vulnerability win? Could honesty win? Could connection matter more than being right? There's something else I still think about often. A moment with one of my children. They were teenagers. That difficult age when everything is intense and emotional and parents can do nothing right. We'd had a conflict about something, boundaries, probably, or rules or expectations. And I'd handled it poorly. Had been too harsh, too rigid, too unwilling to listen to their perspective. Too caught up in being the authority to hear that they had a valid point. The conflict had ended with them in tears and me feeling righteous and certain I'd done the parenting correctly. Held the line, maintained the boundary, done what needed to be done. But over the following days, something nagged, a discomfort, a knowing that something was off. And when I let myself really examine it, really be honest, I knew I'd been wrong. Not about needing boundaries, but about how I'd handled it, about dismissing their feelings. About being so focused on control that I'd missed the opportunity for connection. Admitting that to a teenager felt terrifying. Felt like losing authority. Felt like opening the door to chaos. Because if parents admit they're wrong, doesn't that mean kids will stop listening? Won't respect the rules? Will think they can do whatever they want? All of those fears circled. All of those warnings about never admitting fault to children, about maintaining the upper hand, about showing strength, not weakness. But those fears were based on old ideas. Ideas that didn't actually work. Ideas that created distance between parents and children. Ideas that taught children that adults are hypocrites who demand apologies but never give them. So I went to my child's room, knocked softly, asked if we could talk, and I sat down and I said those 4 words. I was wrong before. The way I handled that conversation was wrong. I was too harsh. I didn't listen to your side. I made it about power instead of understanding, and I'm sorry. The look on their face is something I'll never forget. Shock first, like they couldn't quite believe what they were hearing, and then something else. Something that looked like relief, like being seen, like having their reality validated, like discovering that parents are human too, that they make mistakes too, that they can acknowledge those mistakes. That apologies aren't just things children owe to adults, but things that flow both ways. The conversation that followed was different than any we'd had before. More honest, more mutual, more respectful, because I'd shown respect first. I'd modeled accountability. I demonstrated that being wrong isn't the end of the world. That admitting error doesn't destroy authority. It actually builds it, builds real authority. The kind based on respect instead of fear. The kind based on relationship instead of power. The kind that lasts. Another memory returns to me now. A friendship that had frayed, not dramatically, just slowly, over time. Over small accumulated hurts and misunderstandings and moments where both people felt unseen by the other. And there was one particular incident. Something I'd said. Something I'd thought was fine at the time but had clearly hurt my friend. They'd pulled back after that, become cooler, more distant. And I'd noticed but hadn't addressed it. Had told myself they were overreacting. Had justified my words. Had built a case for why what I said was reasonable and their hurt was excessive. But the distance grew. The friendship that had been close became casual. The conversations that had been deep became surface level. And I missed it, missed them, missed the connection we'd had. But pride kept me from reaching out, kept me from admitting that maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong. That maybe intent doesn't erase impact. That maybe what I thought was fine had actually been hurtful. That maybe I owed an acknowledgement. An apology, an admission of error. It took months before I finally gathered the courage, sent a message, simple and direct. I've been thinking about what I said that day, and I was wrong before. It was hurtful. I didn't see it at the time, but I see it now. I'm sorry. I miss you. The response came quickly. Not anger, not vindication, just relief, just gratitude, just thank you for saying that. I miss you too. And just like that, the door opened. The friendship didn't return to exactly what it was before, but it returned to something real, something honest, something rebuilt on a foundation of accountability and growth instead of pretending nothing had happened. The 4 words had created space for healing, for moving forward, for trusting again. What those experiences taught was this: the words "I was wrong before" are powerful precisely because they're rare, because most people don't say them. Most people defend, justify, explain, minimize, shift blame, do anything and everything except simply admit fault. So when someone does admit it, when someone speaks those 4 words with sincerity and without qualification, it stands out. It means something. It builds trust in a way that 1,000 perfect actions never could. Because perfect actions might just mean someone hasn't been tested yet. But admitting wrong, that shows character. That shows growth. That shows real strength. I remember another moment, this one at work. A decision I'd made that had affected a team. A decision I'd been confident about at the time. A decision that turned out to be wrong. That created more problems than it solved. That made things harder for people I cared about. And the easy path was to blame circumstances, to point to all the factors beyond my control, to explain that anyone would have made the same choice given the information available, to defend the decision as reasonable even if the outcome was poor. But that explanation, no matter how logical, didn't change the impact, didn't change that people were dealing with consequences of my choice, didn't change that they deserved acknowledgement. So in a team meeting, I said it. I was wrong before. That decision I made was wrong. It created problems for all of us. I take responsibility for that. I'm sorry. The room was quiet for a moment, and then someone spoke up, thanked me for saying it, said it meant a lot, said it made them trust me more, not less, and others nodded, and the conversation moved forward, but something had shifted. The team felt more solid, more honest, more like a place where mistakes could be acknowledged instead of hidden, where growth was possible because error wasn't shameful, where trust could deepen because vulnerability was modeled from the top down. That experience challenged everything I'd been taught about leadership, about needing to project confidence always, about never showing weakness, about maintaining an image of having all the answers. But those teachings create leaders people follow out of obligation or fear, not leaders people follow out of respect and trust. Real leadership, the kind that builds real teams and real loyalty, requires the courage to say, I was wrong before when it's true. requires modeling accountability, requires being human and fallible and honest about both. As the years continued, the 4 words became easier to say. Not easy, exactly. There's always a moment of resistance, a moment where pride rises up and suggests defending or explaining or minimizing, but easier than before, because the evidence had accumulated, the evidence that these words build rather than destroy, that they create connection rather than distance, that they generate respect rather than contempt, that they open doors rather than close them. There's something else I think about often: the relationships where these words were never said, where pride won, where neither person could admit fault, where both sides stayed entrenched in their positions, certain they were right, unwilling to budge. Those relationships ended, or they continue but only as shells, only as formalities, only as performances of relationship without the substance. And looking at them from the outside, the waste is obvious. The unnecessary pain, the preventable loss, all because no one could speak 4 simple words. And it's not that one person was wholly right and the other wholly wrong. It's almost never that simple. Most conflicts, most hurts, most distance grows from complexity, from both people contributing, from miscommunication and unmet needs and different perspectives that are both valid. But when neither person can admit their part, can acknowledge where they were wrong, can take responsibility for their contribution to the pain, there's nowhere to go. The relationship stays stuck, frozen in that old hurt, unable to move forward because neither side will create the opening that movement requires. The 4 words create that opening. They don't require being wrong about everything, don't require taking all the blame, don't require saying the other person was completely right. They just require acknowledging the specific ways and moments where error occurred, where harm was caused, where things could have been handled differently. That acknowledgement, even partial, even specific, creates space, creates possibility, creates a bridge. Another memory surfaces now, my own parents, the ways they could never admit being wrong about anything, about parenting decisions that had caused harm, about things they'd said that had hurt, about patterns they'd established that had created problems. Their defense was always the same. We did the best we could. We gave you everything. You don't understand how hard it was. All true, probably, but also not what was being asked for. What was needed wasn't a defense. It was an acknowledgement. A simple, we were wrong about that, or we handled that poorly, or we should have done that differently. Just recognition, just validation that the harm had been real, not imagined or exaggerated or unwarranted. But that acknowledgement never came, and the relationship stayed surface, stayed careful, stayed edited, because sharing the real hurt meant being met with defense, with explanation, with justification, never with the 4 words that could have healed so much. And eventually, sharing anything real just stopped. The relationship became a performance, polite, distant, safe and sad, so sad, because it could have been different, could have been real, could have been close, if only someone had been able to say I was wrong before. That pattern, that inability to admit fault got passed down, showed up in my own parenting, in my own relationships, in my own conflicts. The pattern of defending instead of acknowledging, of explaining instead of apologizing, of protecting pride instead of protecting connection. It took years to recognize it, more years to begin breaking it, and the work continues. The work of catching the old reflex, the old urge to defend, the old pattern of making excuses and choosing differently, choosing the 4 words, choosing vulnerability over armor, choosing connection over being right. I remember a moment when that choice felt impossible. A conflict with a partner, something that had escalated. Both of us dug into our positions, both of us certain we were right, both of us hurt and angry and defensive. And we'd reached that point where the conflict wasn't even about the original issue anymore. It was about winning, about not backing down, about pride. And somewhere in the middle of it, exhausted and sad and recognizing this pattern from my parents, from my own past, from every relationship that had failed because no one could bend, I stopped. Just stopped mid-argument. And I said, I was wrong before. About what I said earlier, about how I reacted, I was wrong. Not about everything. Not admitting fault for things that weren't mine, but about the specific moments where I had been wrong, where I'd been harsh or unfair or reactive. The argument didn't instantly resolve, but it shifted. The energy changed. The defensiveness eased. And my partner, after a moment, said something similar, acknowledged their part. And slowly, carefully, we found our way back to each other. Back to the real issue. Back to problem solving instead of point scoring. The 4 words had broken the cycle, had created the opening, had reminded us both that relationship mattered more than winning. What I've learned over all these years is that the 4 words, I was wrong before, are fundamentally an act of love, of choosing relationship over ego, of valuing connection over being right, of recognizing that the other person's dignity matters as much as our own, of understanding that growth requires admitting error, that trust requires accountability, that respect requires humility. There's something profound about watching someone's face when they hear these words, especially when they've been waiting years to hear them. Especially when they've been gaslit into thinking their hurt was imagined or their perspective was invalid. Especially when they've been carrying the weight of being told they were wrong when they knew, deep down, that both people had been wrong but only one was willing to admit it. The relief that crosses their face. The softening. The visible release of tension they've been holding. The door opening where it had been locked shut. All of it from 4 simple words. And it's not just about healing past harm, though that's crucial. It's also about building future trust. Because when someone knows that the people they're in relationship with can admit being wrong, they feel safer. Safer to be honest. Safer to take risks. Safer to be vulnerable. Because they know that if something goes wrong, if harm occurs, if mistakes happen, there will be acknowledgement. There will be accountability. There will be repair. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to walk on eggshells. They don't have to fear that any mistake will be defended into oblivion rather than simply acknowledged and addressed. As time continued forward, I noticed something interesting. The relationships where these 4 words were spoken regularly were the healthiest relationships, the strongest, the most resilient. Not because there were fewer conflicts, not because people were more perfect, but because mistakes were handled differently. We're acknowledged, we're learned from, we're repaired. The relationship could weather storms because both people knew how to take responsibility, how to admit fault, how to say, I was wrong before and mean it. And conversely, the relationships where these words were never spoken, or spoken only grudgingly with 1,000 qualifications attached, those relationships struggled, stayed stuck in old patterns, accumulated resentment like sediment at the bottom of a river, eventually choked on all that unacknowledged harm. Even when both people wanted the relationship to work, without the ability to admit error, it couldn't. The foundation was unstable. The trust was conditional. The respect was surface level. There's another memory that sits with me. A family gathering, multiple generations present, and an old conflict surfacing. Something that had happened decades before but had never been resolved, never been addressed, just ignored and avoided and pretended away. And watching the older generation refuse to acknowledge their part, refuse to say those 4 words even when the harm was obvious, even when the hurt was still present in their adult children's faces, even when the opportunity for healing was right there, waiting. and watching the pattern continue. Watching another generation learn that admitting wrong is impossible. That pride is more important than relationship. That defense is the only option. And feeling the sadness of it, the waste, the unnecessary pain that will echo forward into more generations until someone finally breaks the pattern. Until someone finally has the courage to say, "I was wrong before," and mean it without qualification. Breaking generational patterns is hard, is lonely sometimes, is being the first one to do something differently and not knowing if it will work, not having a model to follow, not having elders who can show the way because they never learned it themselves. It's trial and error. It's falling back into old patterns and having to recognize it and choose again. It's being gentler with yourself than your parents were with themselves. It's giving yourself permission to be wrong and to admit it and to grow from it. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is passing down the same inability to acknowledge error, the same pride that destroys relationships, the same patterns that create distance and pain and estrangement. The alternative is watching your own children struggle with the same inability you struggled with, and their children after them. The pattern continuing until someone somewhere decides it stops here. It stops with me. I will be wrong sometimes, and I will admit it. And I will show the next generation that being wrong isn't shameful, that admitting error is strength, that growth requires honesty. I think about the 4 words differently now than I did years ago. They used to feel like defeat, like losing, like surrender. Now they feel like freedom, like integrity, like strength. They feel like coming home to myself, to the person I want to be, to someone who values relationships more than pride, who values truth more than being right, who values growth more than maintaining an image of perfection that was never real anyway. And the relationships those words have built, the connections those words have healed, the trust those words have created, all of it is proof that vulnerability is not weakness. That admitting fault is not failure. That being wrong and acknowledging it is far more honorable than being wrong and defending it. The 4 words don't diminish. They elevate. They don't destroy respect. They create it. They don't push people away. They draw them close. There's one more memory I want to share, a recent one. A moment when someone said those 4 words to me. Someone who'd hurt me years before. Someone I'd written off. Someone I'd assumed would never acknowledge what they'd done. But they reached out, and they said it. "I was wrong before, about how I treated you, about what I said. I was wrong and I'm sorry." And the years of hurt, of resentment, of distance, they didn't disappear instantly. But they began to dissolve, began to loosen their grip, because being seen, being acknowledged, being heard, it matters. It matters enormously. And I realized in that moment that this is what we all want, not perfection from each other, not never being hurt, not relationships without conflict. We want acknowledgement when hurt occurs. We want honesty when mistakes are made. We want the simple recognition that our pain is real and the harm that caused it is acknowledged. We want those 4 words. "I was wrong before," said with sincerity, said without qualification, said as a bridge back to connection. If any of this resonated, if these reflections reminded you of relationships that need those 4 words, or if they encouraged you to say them yourself, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to leave a like and subscribe. There are more honest conversations here. More explorations of what builds real connection. More reminders that vulnerability is strength and admission is courage. Thank you for listening. And may we all find the bravery to say, "I was wrong before," when it's true. Our relationships deserve that honesty, and so do we.